So I would expect, however, a lot of dividends to come back next year, particularly in the financial sector, as economies come out of this. Some areas, however, where the damage is more permanent, oil majors would be one, and BP still to cut. I expect BP to cut, and travel, online, retail, which we just touched on. That's going to be more difficult. So some dividends are gone forever, but I think a lot will come back. So obviously you can't chase dividends as an investor. You just would face what's happened. But I think dividends next year, assuming there is a recovery and it's maintained, a lot of the dividends will come back from companies that cut this year. So I wouldn't get too negative about that.
Sorry, there were many signs around this morning about a worsening of relations between China and the UK, then the West in general, and focusing on the Chinese social media app TikTok. Yeah,
TikTok, I think, is China's most successful global app, so that's one of the reasons it's attracted attention. It's not a quoted company. Basically, it collects data and includes tracing, so it provides quite a lot of addictive content. The Americans are claiming it's another counterintelligence threat, which is why it's obviously attracting attention. There was a bit of press over the weekend about its headquartering in London, but I think it's just been caught up in the Chinese situation. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens in that particular case, but it's a function of the fact that relations are not great with the US and China, and to some extent now with the UK and China.
We'll be talking to the head of public policy at TikTok on this programme at 17 this morning. Thank you very much. David Cumming from Aviva Investors.
Tom, thank you. 29 minutes past 6 is the time. We turn to Rob in the sport. Morning, Rob.
Morning, Justin. The weather set fair and an intriguing, maybe exciting final day ahead in the second test in Manchester. England 37 for 2 in their second innings against the West Indies. That's a lead of 219 after bowling their opponents out for 287. The last 6 wickets falling in, well, something of a clatter amidst a fearsome spell from Stuart Broad. Here's our cricket correspondent, Jonathan Agnew.
This promises to be an entertaining final day as England fight to keep the series alive and West Indies battle to keep their 1-0 lead intact. Root's declaration will be key. Ideally, he'll want to be able to take a second new ball, so he needs to close the innings after 11 overs or thereabouts this morning. How many runs can England score in that time? That doesn't hand the West Indies the chance to win. Broad reminded us of his ability to change a game when he took 3 for 1 with the new ball. Having had his say about his omission at Southampton, no one could deny him his satisfied smile as West Indies lost 6 for 45, setting up England's chance of winning today.
It'll be Chelsea against Arsenal in the FA Cup final at Wembley on August the 1st. That's after Chelsea's comfortable 3-1 win against Manchester United in the second semi, with United keeper David De Gea still unreliable as he let in goals from Giroud just before half-time and Mount with a Maguire own goal, Chelsea's third. Fernandes' penalty was United's eventual reply. Here are the two managers, Manchester's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but first Chelsea's Frank Lampard.
I can't ask for any more than that. Maybe a couple more goals, and that's surprising when you play against a team with their quality, but more than that was the work ethic of the performance. When you see a team come out and run, wing-backs jump up to get close to people, midfield players, Jorginho, Kovacic, Giroud, Mount, I could go through the whole team. Very proud of the performance.
Below par from us, of course, coming in to half-time at 0-0 would have been a different scenario. It was one of them who's going to get the first goal. They got the goal after the long break and layoff. We lost our concentration there for a split second after that one, and second half we were chasing it, but weren't good enough.
In the Premier League, meanwhile, Bournemouth are now in deep trouble after a 2-0 home defeat by Southampton, while Leicester continue to falter in the contest for Champions League places. They were beaten 3-0 at Tottenham. And Leeds United will be promoted to the Premier League as champions after winning 3-1 at Derby. And amongst the other lines, victory in the Hungarian Grand Prix for Mercedes Lewis Hamilton. He now leads the Drivers' Championship from teammate Valtteri Bottas, who was third in the race, with Max Verstappen second yesterday, despite crashing on the warm-up laps. And Rory McIlroy has lost golf's world number 1 spot to Spain's John Rahm, who won the Memorial Tournament in Ohio. So to the tips. Market Raisin, 240. Number 2, Something About Angela. And in the 5:30 at Windsor, number 4, Furkan.
Thanks, Rob. Now, tomorrow on Radio 4, the search for forgotten stories.
on BBC Radio 4.
One of his teachers told him that there was no black culture and there was no black history. He spent his life proving that teacher wrong.
The people discovering and preserving the stories of African Americans.
The more that I dig and read, the more that I realize actually American music's been a European-African fusion from the very beginning, and without black people you have nothing.
Archiving Black America with Maya Millett.
I found that exploring history often brings about aha moments like these. Times of discovery that feels like a curtain being drawn back.
Tomorrow morning at 11:30 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Time now is 28 minutes to 7. You're listening to Today on Radio 4. Martha Carney and Justin Webb, and Zeb Soanes has a summary of the news.
The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab will today set out further responses to China's controversial national security law imposed on Hong Kong. It's expected that he will announce the UK is suspending its extradition treaty with the territory. Tensions with Beijing have been growing, and last week the government banned the Chinese technology company Huawei from the UK's 5G networks. Beijing has accused Britain of dancing to the tune of the United States. The government has signed a deal for 90 million doses of coronavirus vaccines being developed overseas. The agreements with a German-US partnership and a French producer are in addition to a pledge for 100 million doses of the Oxford University vaccine undergoing clinical trials. Privacy campaigners say the government's test and trace programme in England has broken data protection laws. The Department of Health confirmed that it failed to carry out the required assessment of the programme's impact on privacy, but said there was no evidence that data had been misused. A cluster of coronavirus cases has been identified at a call centre in North Lanarkshire, which carries out contact tracing for the NHS. At least 7 workers are understood to have tested positive. All staff at the site near Motherwell have been told to get tested. European Union leaders continue talks through the night on a COVID economy recovery fund, which they're trying to negotiate in parallel with a 7-year budget. They remain deeply divided over their plans, and the summit, originally scheduled for 2 days, will continue into a 4th. A court case starts today which could decide the future of more than 250,000 small businesses affected by the pandemic. The Financial Conduct Authority wants a judge to determine whether insurers have to pay out on what are known as business interruption policies. The latest easing of lockdown measures in Wales means that playgrounds, outdoor gyms and fun fairs can now reopen. Some libraries will resume lending in Northern Ireland, but users will need to make an advance booking. The Arab world's first mission to Mars has been launched. The United Arab Emirates has sent a spacecraft named Hope to study the red planet's weather and climate.
It's 26 minutes to 7. With further tensions between the UK and China, the government is facing pressure from inside the Conservative Party to take a tougher stance. The former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood is a member of the China Research Group of MPs. He told the Westminster Hour that he wanted to see a reset in the West's relationship with China.
For decades, conventional wisdom has suggested that it's only a matter of time before China would become more liberal, more economically and politically open, a little bit more like us. And we're seeing that isn't happening. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that we've been duped over the last couple of decades. China is now pursuing a competing geopolitical ideology. I really want to see a reset of our entire foreign policy, bearing in mind that we are sliding towards a Cold War. We can't do this alone. We need to work with our allies.
Now, it's expected that later on today the UK is going to be announcing it's suspending the extradition treaty with Hong Kong, as that could be a route for China to force pro-democracy campaigners back there to face trial. Well, we can talk now to our assistant political editor, Norman Swith. And strong words there from Tobias Ellwood, the sense of being duped, but in a sense there's a balance too for the government because of our economic relationship with China.
That's true, although all the indications are that the government is prepared to take a pretty heavy economic hit as a result of the stand it's taking on China. We've already seen that by the acknowledgement that the Huawei decision will mean the rollout of 5G is going to cost billions more and take at least an extra 2 years. So we are already taking that economic hit. But, I mean, anyone listening to the Foreign Secretary yesterday, I mean, I think it's pretty clear we are going to suspend the extradition treaty. You do not get a Foreign Secretary talking about another country's gross, egregious human rights abuses lightly. Dominic Raab has always been on the hawkish end of things with regard to China. I mean, he was
calling for a reset of relations months ago after the COVID outbreak and the lack of transparency about what had happened in Wuhan, saying that our relations couldn't go back to business as usual. But also just more broadly, it's not just a sort of kernel of hawkish Tory MPs pressing for a reset. I think there is a broader view at Westminster that we do need to rethink our current relations with China. And if you look at the opposition parties, they are actually pressing the government to go further, even to look at possibly imposing Magnitsky-style travel and asset bans on those Chinese officials involved in the persecution of Uyghur Muslims.
Norman, thank you.
The time is 23 minutes to 7. This is quite a big day for vaccine news, potentially a very big day. The early phase 1 data for the Oxford vaccine is going to be published, we expect, in the Lancet. And separately, Britain is arranging to buy more doses of a vaccine that's in development abroad. Fergus Walsh is our medical correspondent. Tell us about that one first, the vaccine abroad that we appear to be doing a deal about.
Yes, so two deals have been done, one with a German-US alliance, BioNTech and Pfizer, and that's for 30 million doses of its vaccine, and it's one of the lead contenders in terms of where it's got to in its trials. Published data at the beginning of the month showing that in volunteers it produced a good immune response. It's an RNA vaccine. And then the second one, which is a very interesting one, is with a French biotech called Valneva, and it's for 60 million doses of a more traditional type of vaccine using inactivated virus. This is the way in which flu vaccines and many other vaccines are made. Much slower off the mark, they're more tricky to produce, and that's going to be manufactured in Livingston in Scotland. So it's going to, in addition to the 100 million doses that have already been bought, it means that the UK will have nearly 200 million doses of coronavirus vaccine in the wings.
And what's really interesting, presumably, Fergus, is that those vaccines you just described, compared with the Oxford vaccine, are different. Not just that they're being done by different companies, but that the technology is different, which gives us a wider possibility, I suppose, of getting something that works.
Absolutely. They're all different approaches. The Oxford vaccine uses an adenoviral vector. It uses another harmless virus to deliver its payload. But that it's a process which is quite new. And the Pfizer vaccine, that's an RNA vaccine. There are none of those that are in use in the world. So the one that we don't hear much about, these inactivated vaccines, which haven't yet gone into trials largely because they are more tricky to produce. If all of the other ones fail, and we should expect most vaccines to fail, we might have to rely on old technology to actually rescue us here. There's a lot of excitement about the Oxford vaccine, the Imperial vaccine, but they're using quite new technologies here, and it may be the old traditional way of making vaccines that might save us.
And just briefly on the Oxford vaccine, if we do get this piece in the Lancet, this publication of the phase 1 data, what should we be looking out for?
We should be looking out for the type of immune response it produces, both for neutralizing antibodies and for another part of the immune system, the T-cell response, which the Oxford vaccine is specifically designed to produce. I'm absolutely expecting that in both of them there'll be a good immune response. The real surprise would have been had they not produced a good immune response, because then, in a sense, it would be back to the drawing board. So this is an essential first step, but it doesn't show whether in the real world this or any of the vaccines actually will provide protection.
Fergus Walsh, thank you.
And now at 19 minutes to 7, let's have a look at the morning papers and news websites. And coverage of the UK's increasingly strained relations with China is prominent on many of the front pages. China tensions mount as extradition treaty shelved, says The Times, as it looks ahead to the anticipated announcement from Dominic Raab later today. A temporary halt rather than a permanent end to the treaty is what's on the cards, according to Whitehall sources quoted in the Daily Telegraph. They say that leaves a final lever to pull if China continues to breach international commitments. The Eye says that what it describes as barbs traded yesterday by the Foreign Secretary and the Chinese ambassador in London over alleged human rights abuses represents a new low in relations.
NHS heroes forced to work for free is the headline in the Daily Mirror. It says a poll shows that staff were already doing an average of an extra 11 hours of unpaid work every week before the coronavirus pandemic hit. The paper blames the scandal of hospital cuts, and its leader insists that Boris Johnson should fill empty vacancies and pay NHS staff what they're worth rather than just clapping them. The NHS, it says, must become a healthy employer.
Online, The Independent says that the NHS is set to pay out £37 million for failings in maternity services at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust in London. The case involves a boy who was left needing lifetime round-the-clock care after